I think the rules of visibility have absolutely changed. I mean, we live in the digital age. So today I always say, I'm not just within an organization, but outside of it. Back then you had to go and pitch your story to a media outlet and hope that the journalist picks it up. Today, there are so many platforms that you own that you can start speaking about your work on. And then internally within the organization, I think that AI has been a great leveler, especially for people in, say, other Asian countries where maybe English is not their native language. Today with ChatGPT and all the other tools out there, you can write more effective emails, you can communicate better, you can post, on internal office notice boards, you can really get your views heard and championed for your work and your team's work.
Before you start using these tools, build up the fundamentals in terms of understanding psychology, consumer behavior, writing headlines and things like that. And then you will become much more effective.
Welcome back to another episode of White and Shine. I'm Dawn, budget babe and author of Take Back Control of Your Money. And I'm joined here with Alex.
Yes, hi, this is Alex Loh. You can find me on socials, your Nest to Next coach, where I support individuals in different seasons of life's transition, spiritually, emotionally, as well as financially.
And one thing about different seasons of their life that remains constant is visibility.
Yes.
So what do we have for today?
So today's session is on visibility at work. And if you're someone that has been extremely competent at work in your late 30s, mid to late 30s, maybe even early 40s, right? And performing well, but for some reason, when it comes to that promotion, you were sidelined and you cannot figure out why you didn't get that promotion over somebody else. Is it a question of visibility? This is a question that we have two guests here today, Joe as well as Debbie, that will help us in a new format on how we will be talking about this. Joe and Debbie, would you like to introduce yourselves, please?
My name is Debbie. I am the founder of Atypical Media. We are a branding and communications consultancy. So essentially, I used to be a journalist interviewing a lot of business leaders and industry icons. And now I help people tell better stories, drawing on my 15 years of journalism and distilling essentially what is their personal narrative and helping them get visibility. So this topic is very close to my heart.
Yes, very excited. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Joe. So I'm the CEO of Escomedia, and we help organizations and executives develop their AI skills. In addition to that, I also teach at many of the universities across Singapore and around the world. So yeah, really excited to be here today.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks, Debbie and Joe, for being on the show. Before we get into the scenarios, maybe based on your own experience, when did you first realize that doing good work wasn't the same as being seen for it? Could it have been in your first job, you're somewhere in the middle of your career, or before you started your own business?
Yeah, so I remember early in my career, I was working in an agency, and I've always been relatively decent at actually the execution work, but I've always struggled with selling myself internally. And so when it came promotion time, I was like, oh, I nailed it, right? Of course to get promoted at a race. That obviously did not happen because I was very much the person behind the scenes. I was always executing, but I never spoke up in terms of meetings. And that did have a detrimental impact, not only inside the organization, but the way clients and leaders perceived me. So that was something I realized that was a roadblock for me early in my career.
Thanks, Joe, for sharing. And Debbie?
Yeah, sure. So I've always been a journalist. I started at the Straits Times and the Business Times. And being a journalist, your output is very visible, right? Your work is clearly in print, and editors can see it, like how many articles you produce, how thorough your research was, how good your writing, how many people you managed to interview. So the mentality then was, if I just put my head down and write really good news articles, the work would be seen. But I think the shift happened for me on two counts. So I moved to Hong Kong and I was working for a few Western publications then. And then I realized that a lot of the senior editors and journalists were non-Asians, and a lot of the researchers and translators were Asians quietly doing the work, getting the news on the ground, doing all the interviews. And then I felt, why are these Asians not speaking up? Because there's so much cultural nuance to cover. So that was one count. And then I think the real shift for me also was when I took on a regional management position. So I was about 35. This was just before COVID hit. I was managing a team of people across 7 destinations around Asia. And then COVID hit, right? And then so our work became really hard to see in a way. And that's when I realized that you need to speak up for a lot of the work. It was a global MNC, so HQ is really far away. So you needed to advocate for not just my work, but the work of my team members who maybe were not as used to speaking up, in order for the regional leads to see as well as then the global leads to see.
Yeah, and we've spoken to a lot of people where they start to understand, especially when they start moving into their mid-careers or in their 30s, that, hey, just being good at my work isn't good enough. But now we're also starting to hear from them that it feels like there's more or something different that they need to do, which leads us to believe that have the rules of visibility changed? Are they trying to play by an old playbook that no longer exists today or is outdated? And is that something new that they should do? So, what do you guys think about visibility today versus the past? What's the same or what could be different?
Yeah, so to add on that, I speak with a lot of senior executives, and one thing they always look for in who they promote is the ability to articulate inside the organization. Now, obviously, if you are an individual contributor and you're doing your work and you're good at executing, I know many executives told me that they cannot promote those people, right? Because they're not able to manage up to the senior leadership. They're not able to manage down, articulate the goals to the broader team. So I think that's always been some case, but I think it is becoming more prevalent as certain things like AI have done a lot of the execution work. They really need someone vocal who can get the team excited and then obviously manage up to the senior
So
stakeholders.
it's not just about managing up, articulating up, but also articulating down. And it's not just about joining the bosses for happy hour drinks every day.
Yes, I think that's the tough part about the middle management is you're on both sides. So you're kind of squeezed in the middle there.
Yeah, I think to add to that, I think the rules of visibility have absolutely changed. I mean, we live in the digital age. So today I always say, I'm not just within an organization, but outside of it. Back then you had to go and pitch your story to a media outlet and hope that the journalist picks it up. Today, there are so many platforms that you own that you can start speaking about your work on. And then internally within the organization, I think that AI has been a great leveler, especially for people in, say, other Asian countries where maybe English is not their native language. Today with ChatGPT and all the other tools out there, you can write more effective emails, you can communicate better, you can post, on internal office notice boards, you can really get your views heard and championed for your work and your team's work as well.
I think that's the challenge, right? Because with AI moving so fast, so prior to this, I was just having a chat with Joe about some of the AI tools, and he very kindly informed me that the one I thought was new, it's apparently already old because it's like last week and apparently yesterday while I was sleeping, something new dropped, which I had no idea about. And that's the scary part too, because with AI being able to do so much work today, we've started to see in the last 2 years organizations flattening, the big firing across many different places. And it's been hard for people to have to adjust to that. I don't think people have really adjusted. They're still trying to survive at this point. And the result, though, is that effort is not as legible anymore. Experience no longer speaks for itself, and judgment is often inferred depending on where your boss sits and what they view about this. So we want to understand what are some of those unspoken rules that now decide in today's age with AI, with digital, what decides who gets trusted, sponsored, and advanced, and versus who's gonna slowly fade into the background.
This is how it's going to work, right? We're going to walk through 5 different real life workplace scenarios and that many mid-career professionals quietly struggle with. And so first, Debbie and Joe, you will explain how this situation is usually interpreted by leaders, right? So it could be putting yourself in the shoes of your client, or it could be in terms of your own experience. And then secondly, we will surface that unspoken rule underneath each scenario so that our audience and guests can then put that to memory and easier for them to understand. Okay, scenario number 1. So this professional says that I'm reliable, but I'm not being positioned for what's next. The situation is where you're the safe pair of hands and you're trusted to deliver, you're trusted to fix, you're also trusted to stabilize. But when it comes to stretch roles, visibility projects, and also promotions, for some reason it goes to somebody else, right? So what do you think as a leader you are thinking when you are passing over this particular individual?
Okay, happy to go first because I've definitely been in this situation as a manager. The thinking here is I don't want to lose my workhorse, right? I don't want to lose my best player. If I promote him, if he goes up, if he goes to another team, then my solid, reliable person who's holding the fort will not be there. And then either I need to then find the next person who maybe isn't as competent, or I have to pick up a lot of the slack myself. I think that's in the mind of a lot of leaders, that worry that promoting this person will leave a big gaping hole. So I think then for the individual, it's about realizing that, not taking on all the work, but showing how it can be a team effort. Not showing that you're replaceable, but that actually you've managed to set up a system, a structure with other people's involvement, so you can be freed up to do higher level work or more visible work in that sense.
Aside from the perspective of potentially losing their most reliable workhorse, do you think there are other reasons why the leaders might not want to promote someone as reliable and dependable?
I think sometimes also when you have too much of a star player, that person tends to be too self-centered. And so when I look for people to promote, it's also someone who can play well with others. And I think the biggest shift that a lot of individuals find very hard to make is learning to be not just a star individual contributor, but being able to, say, celebrate other people, bringing the team together. I think that's what a lot of managers look for in people that they want to promote.
So I'm starting to hear that unspoken rule. I think what both of you have shared is that mid-career visibility is about signaling to your boss about the future trajectory and not just that you're reliable or dependable, because the bosses will be evaluating you on not what you can handle, but what they think you can handle if you move into this new role, even though you're not there yet, and where you're heading. So you have to demonstrate before you're there that you can do certain things or give some good clues so that they will put you in those positions instead of expecting I'm great at this level and I should therefore be promoted to the next level, and then I'll pick up the skills and start showing that I can do the next level. That's a great unspoken rule.
Yeah, I mean, coming from a sports perspective as well, you wouldn't want to make the star player, if he is a bit of a prima donna type of person, the captain, right, or the vice captain of the team, right? You would want to promote someone that is a team player and that can actually lead the team forward. So that's great, right? Scenario number 2. Maybe Dawn, you can go with that.
Okay, so this is a little bit about age. We have people who say, and they always feel this, that younger team members speak more freely, they're more visible to leadership, but you're the one with more experience, yet you don't get the airtime. And sometimes maybe they try to fight for it, but the meeting is only that long. So it gets all taken up by the younger colleagues who speak up and trying to build that visibility because they're the ones with the least in that organization.
Yeah, so I think we should all get better at asking. I always say good things come to those who ask, because when you don't have a clear ask, maybe people will second guess your intentions. They'll think, oh, why is this person being nice to me? Why is this person, going out of their way to make an introduction? Like, is there a hidden agenda? But if you ask very clearly, like, I would like to, this is my ambition. This is how we can work together towards this ambition. This is how I can help you because this is my ultimate goal. And, I see you as a critical part of, this path that I want to go on. Then people are very clear, like, oh, this is why, Debbie's talking to me. She's not just being nice and going to ask for a favor later on. And I think, this helps to reduce a lot of miscommunication.
I want to add also that I feel like I also was in a journalism school in comms, week in week to be exact, and we learned a lot about speaking up, being vocal, because that's a part of the training that we get in school, right? So I remember in my 20s I would speak up a lot, but then as I got into my 30s I started to think there's no need to. I rather let someone else talk. I prefer listening, and if I don't have anything super value to add, or sometimes it's that I do have something to add, but I want to take this back, do a little bit more research first before I present instead of jumping the gun. I didn't have that level of restraint when I was in my 20s. Did you think that the senior professionals are being penalized for being restrained and measured?
I definitely see that at certain levels. As you progress in the career, there's obviously more responsibility on you. There's greater risk. You have maybe family responsibilities, as we were talking about. So if you have, say, in my case, wife and 2 kids, I'm not going to jeopardize it by saying something that's going to ruffle the feathers, right? But if I'm young and I'm trying to make a name for myself, who cares, right? I'll just say it. And I did when I was that age, right? And it did go incredibly well sometimes. It went really bad sometimes as well too. But I think as you progress, as you age, as you take on responsibilities, your risk appetite for many people does tend to change.
Yeah, and I think the ability to listen is something that's missing in this age, in this very noisy age of, where it's so easy to produce content and to have an opinion and to have a very polarizing opinion, as clickbait. The ability to listen is something that AI can't teach us, right? And that's what we all need as we all, get segmented into digital echo chambers. Um, to listen and really see somebody for what they're saying, and also then the ability to read the room and to, like you said, to pause first, think about it, understand what's the dynamics that's happening, in this room, in this organizational structure, before giving a more considered response. So all is not lost, I think, for senior executives. There is a lot of strengths there.
So
That
those
they
are a
can
lot of like strong soft skills that aren't always verbalized, that aren't always loud. How then can these people create visibility for something so quiet?
I think that visibility isn't always just about being louder. I think it's about being very clear. So if you are clear on what you have to offer, what your USPs are, what your strengths are, and you show it consistently, you don't always have to be the first to speak. You don't have to be the loudest. You don't have to post the most frequently on LinkedIn. But every time you speak, it's consistent to the core of who you are, your professional identity, to the causes you champion, to the work ethics and values that you bring. I think people will see that over time. And, reputation isn't built overnight, right? It's built day by day through small, consistent efforts. And I think that if people have the stamina to hold on to that and not just look at, oh, all the younger people are getting all the attention, I think that hopefully is quite reassuring for some of us.
I think just adding on to that, I think it's also how you frame your achievements internally. And I learned this, I was in a corporate a couple of years back, and my boss told me, because I was including a bunch of numbers, and he says, include some new client logos that we got. And I just put some logos on a slide. He's like, yeah, do that. The boss will love it, right? He'll think you're doing an incredible job. So that was, once again, some guidance that I got is, once again, how do you structure your achievements? Because oftentimes in many organizations, particularly in MNCs, every quarter, whatever it is, there's a quarterly business review. You have to make a case for yourself, whether you like it or not. So that goes back to where we're talking about understanding your boss and who you're actually presenting to, what matters to them, and then repositioning that back in your communications. So you let that speak for yourself. Going back to Debbie's point, you don't have to be the loudest person. As long as you're clear and it's aligned with what your boss wants, that works out incredibly well for most people.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying Wise and Shine so far. I'm your host Reggie, aka your chief financial coconut, and for us to continue to do this show so that you become a tad bit wiser every week, you gotta like, share, subscribe, help us beat the algorithm. But even more importantly, if you can, comment in the comment section below. Let us know your thoughts and also some questions that you would love us to answer. Yep, now back to the show.
I love that. I love this. So far, this is coming to be my favorite unspoken rule, which is that you don't have to keep talking. Visibility is not that you post the most number of LinkedIn posts after every meeting. I had this big insight. I read it and I get really tired. I'm like, was it really that big of an insight? But it's when you speak, you are clear and you're consistent every single time. So you may not speak as much as the people with more stamina or more at risk, with less at risk, so they're more willing to speak their minds. But every time you speak, there is impact. And that impact can be felt by knowing what your bosses are looking at. They might not be looking at who raises their hands or speaks up during the meeting, but who actually gets me that new logos. Yeah, that's such a great unspoken rule, and I think it is a good reminder of what visibility looks like in this new age. All right, so now to scenario 3.
Scenario number 3, we talked a little bit about AI, right? So this is an AI scenario. AI now does part of what used to define our respective expertise. You talked about how AI can write stories, right, very easily. Your output feels less distinctive. You're unsure how to stay relevant or visible. Right? So when execution is automated, how then can we still show that visibility at work?
Yeah, so I've thought a lot about this because I think AI, as we talked about, has tremendous pros and cons in the workplace, one of which is efficiency. The downside of that is everyone's afraid AI is going to take their job. And so even going back to, because I was a former journalist as well too, the skill of copywriting, right? Because this is what I'm seeing now in most MNCs are like, oh, we don't need to do any copywriting, anything like that. We just have ChatGPT do everything. But I see some of the output that goes out there. And I think, senior journalists like ourselves would look at that and be like, oh my gosh.
I can recognize when something is ChatGPT.
Yes, exactly. So for me, that's detrimental. So I always tell my younger, students, stuff like that, build up that muscle first, right? Before you start using these tools, build up the fundamentals in terms of understanding psychology, consumer behavior, writing headlines and things like that. And then you will become much more effective in your particular skill set, right? So that is one. The other is developing your own style and flavor, right? Because I imagine this, I like to cook. So everyone's cooking the same dish, right? We all have access to AI and it's providing the recipes, but you're going to provide your own unique spin on it. You're going to add an ingredient that your mother or grandmother used that makes it bring it to life for you. So this is something that I think AI cannot bring into it, is our experiences, our flavors, our taste, as they're being called, and then injecting that into your work. I think that's the main differentiator that I'm hopefully going to see more in terms of in the workplace.
I love that analogy on cooking and creativity, right?
I think one of the advantages of AI is that it takes away, it makes us more productive and efficient. And that then frees us up to do the more human things that we previously maybe didn't have time to do, which is building networks, having coffee with not just your team members, but also people in other teams, right? It's like the old ancient wisdom of Guanxi, which, sitting down with people and saying, what's troubling you? What is the obstacle? What are you struggling with today? Or what are your hopes? What are your dreams? What are your ambitions for this year? How can I help you, achieve that? AI can't tell you all of these things. You can't sit at a computer and say, hey, what's my teammate thinking? Or what's my boss thinking? And these are the networks that will support your progression in a company. And I think the other thing is the ability to show up as human, right? So AI can't account for mistakes. They can't admit mistakes. And I think that is what I always talk about this thing called strategic vulnerability. So not just putting your whole life story, your childhood trauma out there in public, but showing parts of yourself that are a little bit vulnerable, a very curated part of yourself that's vulnerable, because nobody likes a very perfect leader, right? People like to see themselves in you. And if you are able to say, okay, I messed up on this is what I'm learning, this is how I've grown, I think that also helps to then build bonds across the company. And it is these invisible bonds that, will support you when you want to push a new project, right? When you want to clear blockages to say yes to something you've been working on, when you want to ask for that promotion, are there not just your boss, but are there other people in the organization that can then support you?
So I guess the real big fear that everyone has is, what does credibility look like when everyone can produce with AI now?
So I think even for reporting, I believe that for the most part, obviously there's some hallucinations sometimes with some of the tools, but in terms of raw data crunching, AI will crush most people, right? It's just much, much better than most people. Although, once again, there are some issues that happen from time to time. I think what I was telling someone yesterday is how you interpret the data, right? Because the AI will give you some kind of conclusion, but it may not be relevant to your market or your consumer or whatever it is, right? So I think you still need a human in the loop to provide that strategic lens. That's something that currently AI cannot do. It's very good at analyzing and saying, okay, here's how our top line numbers are doing, et cetera, but it cannot give you the recommendation for someone, like you said, who has experience, who's on the ground. That's where we still need the human in the part. But I do think that many people are just copying and pasting and then just sending it off. That I think is going to have a huge impact negatively on their careers for those who just, once again, do that.
Yeah. And I think AI, because it's trained on past data, it cannot forecast as well. It cannot see risks. It cannot make bold, original, creative suggestions and, the big, bold ideas that are going to, shift industries and businesses. And if you use AI to take away some of the grunt work or do the grunt work a lot faster, then if you free your mind up and sometimes I think we need to just shut off ourselves from all social media. Like I find, Instagram is a big creativity sapper, right? After a while, you see everyone's Instagram posts start to look the same, right? The video formats are the same because you're playing into the algorithm. But sometimes it's better to just sit in a vacuum. And that's when the big, bold, original creative ideas will come. And also disagreeing. I like my AI because it never disagrees with me, but is that healthy, right? They always say, you are right. And I always challenge it. And I always say, are you sure? And then it will, oh, no, you are right. Yeah, that's wrong. Like, here's this other thing. But sometimes we need people to disagree with us, to contradict. And we should not be afraid of this contradiction because that sharpens our thinking. So if you can be that person who then says, hang on, these all sound like great ideas, but based on my lived experience, like you were saying, these are potential risks that we need to start considering or maybe we need to think about. I think that adds so much value to an organization.
I love that. So it's actually bringing out a new unspoken rule, which is that in this scenario 3, maybe visibility is not so much about agreeing with your boss, but daring to disagree and being equipped to disagree better because you can use AI to find those data points to disagree and as well as putting in your lived experience. I think that's something that the younger folks with less lived experience and insights would not be able to do. So the older professionals, you don't have to worry because you do still have your edge, but you have to play a different game.
Just remember your lived experiences and also sharing vulnerability and building relationships.
Yeah, great one. So that's using the tool to help us instead of being scared by it. All right, so scenario 4.
Scenario number 4. People like working with you, they trust you, but no one is pushing your name forward. Right? So why doesn't respect automatically convert into sponsorship?
I think this goes back to my previous point of asking. If you don't ask, actually people might think you're really happy where you are. And I think unfortunately a lot of women face that. Because people assume, like I have 2 young kids, right? People assume, I'm happy where I am. I'm busy with my family obligations. I don't necessarily want more. And unless I ask and I say, I'm hungry for more. I want, I'm this ambitious. I want to do this and that. People might just think, okay, like let's not overburden this, person. And sometimes if that's your most capable member, you don't also want to pile more work onto them. So it could just be that you didn't ask, and so that's why they didn't think to advocate for you.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the point you're mentioning. Like, if I hire someone in my workhorse, then how is that going to impact me? Do I have to work later because the person who used to do my PowerPoint presentations is now doing something else, for example, right? So I think going back to the earlier point, understanding how it's going to help your boss or whoever, the committee that's going to get you promoted, basically I use the concept of what's in it for them. Answering that question for each of them will help the conversation accelerate faster.
How can someone who it's not natural for this person to ask, right? So, I mean, of course, it's not fair to expect leaders to just notice, right? Because I think what we're trying to drive here, the point here is you need to ask. But if someone doesn't have that natural ability to ask, what are certain things that this person might be able to do?
I think it goes back to building relationships, like you said. Oftentimes, and I was once in a corporate environment a few years back, and I was the newbie. Everyone had been there forever. They all had really deep relationships. So I said, okay, well, how can I build my own relationships in here? So I invited people for coffee because there was a nice barista. It was an MNC. So there was a nice barista. I said, hey, let's catch up for coffee downstairs, right? So I think this is something that's important, right? It doesn't necessarily happen in the boardroom or in the office. It could be when you're catching up for lunch. This is something I was very proactive when I joined the MNC. My boss, no one ever asked him for lunch. I think because they were scared of him. This very big, imposing guy. And I was like, what do I have to lose, right? Hey, let's catch up for lunch. We all have to eat, right? He's like, yeah, sure. So we're catching up. Obviously, he's a lot more relaxed. I'm finding out more about him, his family, taking the concept of guanxi, right? And, I got to know him at a deeper level, and he got to know me as well, too. So when there are any opportunities, he says, oh, yeah, Joe, I remember you. We had that chat. It implanted in his mind. So I think the context and the environment is really important. It doesn't necessarily happen in the office. It can happen anywhere.
I love that. I discovered another new unspoken rule, which is that visibility might be made in places or ways that others are not doing. Because if everyone is speaking up in the boardroom, he's not going to remember there's 10 people. But if you're the only one who asked him out for lunch, he's going to remember. And when you do things that people don't do, that's like the old, it's such a timeless classic. That's how you get noticed, not by doing what everyone else is doing. So we all keep asking ourselves, what is the new visibility playbook? What do we need to do? Teach me the tactics. But actually, it might just all boil down to being human. Noticing that, oh dear, no one else is asking my boss for lunch. Maybe I should do it. What do I have to lose?
That was a good move.
Yeah. I love that story.
Power move.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't my intention at the time, but it did work out incredibly well, right? Because it also goes back to my personality. Even though I teach and I talk a lot, I am extremely introverted. So if you ask me to speak in front of a boardroom with 10 executives, I would get super nervous. But when we're catching up for a nice Japanese restaurant downstairs, I'm going to be a lot more relaxed, right? He's going to be a lot more relaxed. So that gravitates more towards my personality and where I shine. I may not shine in the boardroom, but I shine in the one-on-one conversations.
I think that's a really good point, like playing to your strengths, right? It's not about trying to be somebody you are not, and which then you seem very awkward and forced, but knowing this is what you bring to the table. And I would say for people who are not as bold to ask, maybe it's also about showing then, right? Like if you want to move upwards, say to a more tech-based role or say a sales role, you could, every time, you could show it through how you are preparing yourself for that role. For example, when you talk to your boss, you could say, I use my Skills Future credit to do a course on how to become a better public speaker because I'm thinking about sales and that's something I like to think about in my free time. So you're kind of paving the way without being too domineering and say, hey, I want to transfer to the sales department. I want to own a P&L. But you're saying, this is the growth that I'm seeking. This is how I'm proactively developing myself, which, shows that you are a good, competent team player. And yeah, when that opportunity comes, you are ready for it. And that's how you sort of position subtly yourself in the minds of decision makers as well, without being too pushy.
Can I add on to that? Because I'm a massive believer in leaders want to help people who help themselves, right? So if you were taking your own initiative to get some certifications or build some different skill sets, those are the type of people, whether you're young or you're senior, that managers want to help out, right? Because you're doing the work yourself. So that's an excellent point.
You've also highlighted that maybe visibility is also in showing that you're hungry for growth and that you act on that hunger, even if your manager is not doing it for you, even if the organization doesn't have that course or that skill and you're not even in that role, but you're doing it. I just thought of a few random ideas, like just, telling my boss like, hey, did you watch that episode of like Diary of a CEO or like Mel Robbins? And usually people with certain growth mindsets and learning skills, I realize they tend to watch and listen to the same people. So there is like that similar language, but it's not going to show up in the boardroom because this meeting is about our sales and KPI. They were not talking about Mel Robbins. But when you just slip that in, the people who connect, they'll connect. So that's actually another good way to demonstrate your visibility. So for the introverts listening to this podcast episode, I hope it gives you hope because we always think that visibility is about speaking up, being loud. But no, we're unlocking a lot of unspoken rules right now that could play to an introvert's advantage.
Very nice. Right. And that brings us to the last scenario.
I'm having so much fun. Don't want this to be the last scenario.
We can plan for the next one. Right. Thank you, Cheryl. So scenario number 5, you're invited to senior meetings. You speak occasionally. Decisions still seem to form around you, but not with you. So is this a communication issue or is it a power issue or does it go back to that same question or, not being articulate to ask to say, hey, please include me in the next thing that's going to be happening?
I have to confess I've learned this very hard way in my own career because I'm a very outspoken person. I'm very opinionated. And I've brought that to, some of the roles I've been in. I think it's, whether it's communication or power, I think it depends on the context. So in one of my roles, I had to deal with the Japan and Korea market. And that is where I think it is a cultural issue. Where a lot of boardroom decisions are not made in the boardroom. They are, I think there's a Japanese term for it, right? So basically before the boardroom meeting, everyone talks to each other, either one-on-one, the decisions are already made and you're in there basically just to harmoniously pass the resolution and make the decisions. So don't be upset if it seems like you contributed in that meeting and the decision was still made to the contrary because maybe it was a done deal even before the meeting started. So again, I think it's then the power of this guanxi, right? Did you talk to the right stakeholders? Did you talk to the decision makers? Did you get their support rather than just mouthing off in a meeting? When you have your silent or vocal supporters, when you then push that idea through, then people will say, yes, I support it because you did the groundwork before that.
Just to echo that, I was hearing a story from a VP recently who was telling me when he was young in his career, he basically, instead of going first in the meeting and sharing his ideas, which may, upset people, he went behind the scenes and scheduled one-on-ones with each stakeholder to navigate the risk and make sure they were involved, right? So he got the buy-in before they walked in the meeting. So that by the time the CE walked in, he had 4 or 5 people who were like, yeah, that's a great idea, right? So he actually, and this is a great trick as well too, positioned it in a way where it was their idea, right? Even though he planted the seeds, this is something he brilliantly done. He said, okay, he got them talking and he got them putting their own unique spin on it. So they felt invested. And by the time the meeting came by, they're like, oh yeah, it's a great idea. And he's like, yeah, no, it's because it's my idea. But of course, he kept his mouth shut. But once again, he understood the dynamics. He knew who was going to be involved. He tried to get them involved behind the scenes because if he tried to bring it up in front, people would assert the authority and say, no, that's a terrible idea, right? But when it's their idea, they're like, yeah, this is a great idea. Let's go ahead with it, right? So I think that was imagine like a Game of Thrones type of thing where you're behind the scenes, but it's true. It works out incredibly well.
So involve stakeholders prior to decisions being made, and that's where you get your agency.
Yeah. All right. So we hope that you guys have learned some really valuable unspoken rules for visibility. Not so unspoken now that we've said it out loud. But I think the gist of it is that visibility does not have to be loud. We are all very much held back by what we think visibility is. And if you found this useful, be sure to also share it with your friends, especially the introverts who feel like they're never getting anywhere because they can't do what the extroverts do. But like as Debbie so articulately said just now, you play to your strengths, not to someone else's strengths.
And if you're not already following us on social media, please head on down to our website, www.thefinancialcoconut.com. Leave your email address there so you will be kept informed when we launch new episodes.
What do you think of this new format? Do you like it? Would you like us to repeat it for future episodes and topics? Let us know too in the comments below or just drop us an email. Our producer will be looking at this and we hope to experiment with new stuff, whatever works. Let us know what you think. Meanwhile, thank you so much for tuning in into Wise and Shine. We hope that these tips will help you in your career and beyond, and we'll see you on the next episode.